Good day. This is the 34th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. In this series, I discuss theoretical and practical problems of the decolonial movement. Today, I'll start a four-part series, a sub-series on the future of the decolonial movement, and part one focuses on the problem of the decolonial movement. Now, I base my analysis of the decolonial movement not just from a theoretical point of view, but from my practical involvement in this movement. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about what I view as the decolonial movement and the theoretical problems that comes with it. Now, on my website www.sandohira.com, if you look at the About page, you'll see a link to an article that I published in the Long View, the journal of the Islamic Human Rights Commission 2 years ago, I think it was, where I outlined my journey from Marxism to decoloniality. Like many activists in the world, I was one of those probably hundreds of millions who in the early 70s, I was born in 1955, came from Suriname, Dutch colony of Holland in Latin America, Latin Abiala. It is a colony which got independent in 1975, and I moved with my family in 1970 to the Netherlands. And during my years in secondary school and later on at university, major issues were, of course, the war in Vietnam, the imperialist war of the United States in Vietnam, the Third World solidarity, and I got involved in that like many, as I said, millions across the world. And at that time, when you were looking for a narrative of liberation, Marxism was the narrative that was in discussion in many parts of the world, in many liberation movements, and obviously also in the communities of the people who were getting radicalized in the early 70s and later on. So I got involved in the Marxist movement, more specifically the extreme left of it, which is the Trotskyist movement, the Fourth International. And I was very well versed in the classics of Marxism. I had the collected works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, all the works of Rosa Luxemburg, which is my favorite Marxist, Trotsky, of course, but also, Bebel and Kautsky and just the classics. And what came after that, there was a lot of discussion within the Marxist movement after de-Stalinization, when Stalin died and Khrushchev in 1956 revealed the horrors and the crimes of Stalinism. You got this idea of Euro-Marxism, where it tried Althusser and Poulantzas and others tried to figure out some kind of Euro non-Stalinist version of Marxism. I studied economics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, so I was attracted to Ernest Mandel, the main theoretician of the Fourth International. He was an economist, read some great books on Marxist economic theories. So I really got involved in Marxism, like many people who later became involved in decoloniality, although had that route. Now, the reason I got disenchanted with Marxism, which was first of all, the sectorism which I encountered, especially in the Fourth International, that claimed obviously to be the best theoreticians of Marxist movement. And I find I was attracted, and I was a big sympathizer of the Cuban Revolution. I supported the Sandinistas. I was heavily involved in the solidarity movement with the socialist revolution in the island of Grenada, led by Maurice Bishop. I was president of the Solidarity Committee. Went in July, a few months before the murder of Bishop by his comrades in October 1983. So I went to Grenada with a solidarity group to get the. I knew some of the leaders of the New June movement. They came to Europe. I had conversations with them. Um, and for me, it was a natural thing that people who are progressive, even if, if they don't adhere to Trotskyism, that's not a problem. Maybe Trotskyism is not correct. So you have to be open-minded about it. Because in the Trotskyist movement, this was this paradigm that we know it all. We know it. And then they never cared to think about how come that you never have led a revolution successfully in the rest of the world. And your main focus is about criticizing the left rather than criticizing imperialism. That's the basic. Since I got involved in the Grenada Revolution very heavily, I found it hard to stay within the Marxist framework, and especially when Maurice Bishop was executed by his colleagues who invoked Marxism and Marxism-Leninism as a reason to do so. I got bogged down because I think any theoretical framework should lead to a better world, not and better relations between human beings. So the idea that people who don't agree with you should be cast aside and see as an enemy, I can't subscribe to that notion, which is basically within the sectarianism of Marxism at that time prevalent. So I left Marxism for a while. I did other things. I have a consultancy company with my wife. We focus on that. Later, I got into cultural activities, and then sooner or later, you feel that even if economically you were successful in your work, you feel some void, some emptiness in your life, that you feel that you should be part of that movement to strive for a better world, and that you can't stay aside and let others do the work. So that's why I came involved again to see how can I how can I make my contribution as I used to do. So I came back in activism. I think I did some work on culture, on history of colonialism, indentured labor, build databases of archival records of indentured labor. But at the end of the day, when I met many people in the decolonial movement, I saw that there's a way to get involved in changing the world. So initially, I got involved organizationally with a informal network, what was done called Decoloniality Europe, and later out of that came a foundation of which I'm the secretary, the Decolonial International Network Foundation, which was founded in The Hague a few years ago. And so that work in these networks enabled me to develop, get experience in the decolonial movement and identify what the problem is of the decolonial movement and what kind of contribution we could make and I could make to the movement. I used to travel extensively across the world, giving lectures on decolonizing the mind, connecting with people who are involved in the decolonial movement. So I get a feel of the diversity of opinion, the diversity of characters. Obviously, in academia, there's a strong hold of the decolonial movement, but certainly outside of that, there's a lot going on. So let's see what the decolonial movement is. I define it as a social movement that locates and connects the origin of the current problems of the world within the system of colonialism while seeking solutions that transcend the colonial system by decolonizing the world. So the Marxist social movement locates the problems in class. Liberalism doesn't see class as a problem. They see individual liberty as a problem. But the decolonial movement sees colonialism as the location of the origin of problems and how to transcend that system. And colonialism I define as a collection of global systems of economic, political, social, and cultural institutions that the global north has created in order to rule the world in a colonial world civilization since 1492. And the civilization is a collection of societies with economic, political, social, and cultural institutions that have a common cultural base. And the common cultural base of the colonial world civilization currently is the European Enlightenment, as I explained in my video on the Dityan theory of racism. And our aim is to transform the current colonial world civilization in a new decolonial world civilization. So that's a grand idea. It's not so easy, and can we do it? How can we do it? These are the questions we need to discuss. Now, what I saw as the biggest problem in a decolonial movement, from a practical point of view, from the work I was doing, what I saw is that we need a comprehensive, coherent, and integral theoretical framework. So what do I mean with that? I mean a comprehensive framework is a framework that produces concepts on how to look at the most important dimensions of a society, how to look at world history, how to look at economic, political, social relations, including relations with nature, ecology, how to look at culture. There are other aspects of a society, but these aspects are essential to make a framework comprehensive. So if a framework doesn't have a comprehensive view, but let's say only on epistemology, on social relation, on racism, then it's not comprehensive. It needs to be coherent because the concept of the different dimensions shouldn't contradict each other. They should be consistent and logical. So if you have a decolonial theory that embraces feminism and a decolonial theory that criticizes feminism, then it's not coherent. The decolonial theory is not coherent, you see, because it's not consistent and logical. A part criticizes feminism, a part embraces feminism. Then it needs to be integral. And integral means that all these concepts that you build in the different dimensions should have a common base. And the common base are some key concepts that you find in all the dimensions. Now, in liberalism, a key concept is individualism, and in Marxism, it is class. Now, in decolonial theory, what is the basic concept from which you derive the dimension? That is a weakness of decolonial theory now. Now, there are many examples outside of the West, outside of the European Enlightenment, of comprehensive, coherent, and integral framework. For example, Confucianism is developed by Chinese philosopher Confucius and his followers 2,500 years ago. And the basic concept from which all the other things are developed, is that the society should be based on the concept that humans are essentially good with virtues such as compassion, humaneness, trustworthiness, dignity, and honor. And these virtues need to be instilled by education, rituals, and good governance. That's the basis for the social order and hence the basis for the social sciences. In Buddhism, developed also almost 2,500 years ago by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha in India. And the basic concept is that human life is a cycle of suffering and reincarnation that can be broken individually through nirvana, a state of enlightenment that one reaches through meditation, abstinence of desires. And from that you build up a Buddhist economic system, a Buddhist political theory, etc. Islam has as a basic concept Tawhid, the oneness of God. And God provides moral guidance to human beings regarding their behavior and how to set up social, political, cultural, and economic institutions. Christianity is a similar religion based on the Bible and the concept of Trinity. There's one God manifested in three forms, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And God sent his Son to earth to save humanity from the consequences of his sin. And it provides the moral guidance for setting up a Christian society. And then obviously, I mentioned the European Enlightenment already. Now, what happens if you don't have such a framework? And my critique of the decolonial movement is that currently we lack such a framework. If you don't have it, you don't have a roadmap to develop practical policies, because any theory of a social movement should develop practical consequences. What is our economic policy for the decolonial movement? Are we in favor of setting up a planned economy like Marxism? Or do we embrace private entrepreneurship as a creative means of developing economy? So if you don't have an economic theory, you don't have practical policies. And that goes for political theory, social theory, cultural theory, so a comprehensive framework provides you practical guides. If you don't have it, the social movement will become fragmented at its core. And what a theory should do for a social movement, it should provide organizational guidelines for how to build a decolonial movement. Are we building parties in different parts of the world? Are we building networks? Are we striving for a revolution, and is that peaceful or not? What is it? In Marxism, there are clear guidelines for it. You see, a national liberation movement has such guidelines. The decolonial movement doesn't provide it. And if it doesn't, it will lose its relevance for social struggle and become obsolete, and people studied academia but without any practical consequence. So I deal with some of these aspects in the introduction of my book, but you could download the PowerPoint here, and on my website, if you go to the website, www.sandehere.com, you'll see an article, if you go to the article section, that deals with the future of the decolonial movement. If you want to support this channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussions group. And if you want to make a donation, look at sandehere.com on how to do it. Thank you for your attention. Next week, I'll go into part 2 of this series.